couples who got married on the basis, if we're both not married by X years old, we'll marry each other. How did things work out? My lesbian cousin always said this about her college best friend. That if they were both single at 30 they would get married strictly for the tax benefits. She came out when she found a new girlfriend at her new job a year later. I always found it funny how she tested the waters around family with the tax benefit stuff. Everybody was supportive, she wasn't even the first cousin to come out. I'm just glad she is living her best life. We were best friends for a long time in high school. I was really into her but the feeling wasn't mutual. I told her if we were single 5 years from now I could see us getting together and getting married. I moved across the country and we mostly lost touch for a couple years, but then almost exactly 5 years after I'd said that, we reconnected and I told her I was miserable where I was. She had just moved to a new city, I moved in with her, and we got together pretty quick. In 2 weeks, that'll have been 6 years ago. We just bought a house and our daughter's first birthday is next month. It was rocky at first, since we were both escaping miserable situations and living in a studio apartment, but everything worked out and I live with my best friend. My mom has a similar story, but without that agreement. She was in a relationship with a dude, and he decided to move to Italy so he could actually earn money. My mom left him and found my dad after that and had me and my brother, and the Italy dude also met his wife there and had 2 kids. Skip like 25 years, and both are divorced, mostly due to the other partner being kinda terrible. My mom's friend reconnects the Italy dude and her, and he comes over to our country all the way from Italy just so they can talk. I immediately sparked with him, and we really enjoy hanging out and talking and exploring food together. Now skip almost 2 years, and they've been married for a year, and enjoying life over in Switzerland. If you made this into a movie, people would say it wouldn't happen. We met when we were 18 and made the agreement at 20 that if we were both single at 30 we would get married. We dated other people for a while. If I was single she had a boyfriend, if she was single I had a girlfriend, but we always went to each other's family events and holidays, even if a significant other was in the picture for either one of us. One night when I was 25 I was out to dinner with my then girlfriend for a friend's birthday / going away party and then girlfriend, and I got into it because she didn't want to be there and was mad I wanted to stay. Best friend was moving from the Midwest to Seattle and we had known each other our whole lives and lived together through college. I told her I would get her an Uber back to my apartment, but I was staying and we would talk when alcohol wasn't involved. My sister called right after. She ran into my friend at a festival a few hours away. They had a chat, and she told my sister she loved me, but didn't want to get in the way of my relationship. My sister knew it was rocky already and called me with her to tell me. As it turned out, I had loved my best friend for years but the timing was never right. Broke up with then girlfriend the next day. Went to visit best friend that night. We were dating by the end of that night, engaged 6 months after, and now, at 30, have been married 4 years with an almost 3-year-old daughter. I'm glad we waited until the timing was right. We learned about ourselves during that time and got to know each other very well as best friends. I got together with my best friend. We knew one another for years, had much of the same interests, had a lot of the same friends, grew up with many of the same experiences. We both knew and cared and loved each other very much, so we decided to give it a go. It turns out values are a huge factor when it comes to relationships. I mean, obviously, right? She was more religious and conservative than I realized when we were just friends, and I realized very soon that having a close history with a friend you care about isn't enough to make it work. I realized, even if it isn't apparent at first, sometimes you're only friends with someone for a reason. But we were probably the exception, and I really should have listened to my gut more than my emotions. That was my whole approach to dating growing up. Tried to befriend girls first, and if I liked them enough, I would date them with the intention of getting married later on down the line. I didn't like the whole dating to meet people thing our society does nowadays. I wasn't in it to mess around, I was searching for my soulmate, and they were damn well going to be my best friend. Guess the intentionality paid off, because I met my best friend and wife pretty quick. Been married 3 years now, I'm 22. That line is about hanging out with strangers in a bar and maybe you'll go home with one of them. That situation isn't comparable to regularly going to sleep next to someone you don't love, feeling stuck with them, wondering if things would be better if you left them, knowing they probably wouldn't be, knowing you're not just currently with someone who doesn't deeply care for you, but they will never deeply care for you, and you have committed yourself to being with them anyway. Yeah, my gay best friend and I made that agreement once at 16. We lived in a very conservative religious area and it was more of an agreement of, if we turn 22 and neither of us has moved somewhere safer for you than this, let's get married as a cover story. I'm ace anyway and we can split the rent. He and I both moved away before then, but the agreement held until that day as far as we were both concerned. I made this arrangement with my best friend from college. We spent so much time together, people thought we were dating and it led to some strife in many of my possible relationships because they saw her as a threat. But that wasn't the nature of our relationship. Strictly friends. I had interest in her one time but was quickly friend-zoned and didn't try to make any advances. She never held interest in me. One night, close to the end of college, we went out and grabbed some beer at a local place and were transparent that we could see ourselves getting married to one another. We made an agreement that if, by the age of 30 or 35, I can't remember now, we were both single, we would get married. After college, we went our separate ways. I continued with school, she got a job. We talked inconsistently, maybe once every few months, for about 2 years. I happened to be in her city one day in 2020 and we grabbed coffee. We talked a little more after that, then things really picked up here in the last few months. We're engaged, getting married in March. Jumped the gun a little, but damn it, this is the best decision and relationship I've ever been in. Dated a girl in high school for 3 years. We were good for each other. We went to different colleges and she broke up with me at her father's advice. We lived our lives. Found each other in our mid-20s. Did the thing 20-year-olds do and she got pregnant. Not my child though. Math didn't add up. The biodad bounced and I helped her through the pregnancy. DNA test proved what we thought. No biggie, I was willing to sign the papers as the child was my own and raise him together with her. She opted to let the biodad try to be a father, once again on her dad's advice. This is when we made the 30s and singles plan. Lived the rest of my 20s going to school, bartending, entrepreneurship and the like. Married a different girl and that was it. So I thought. Wife I had been with for 7 years UPS and tells me she's in love with her boss. Divorces. Mid-30s. Facebook the old flame and behold biodad is a shit person and she's had it. Kicks the guy out. This point they've had a second child though. I have 0. Fuck it, let's do this. Take on both kids as my own and we've been married for 4 years. Pizza night is on Fridays and we have all the coolest video games. I was a military pilot and doing a lot of deployments through Japan. Being boring as fuck, or I prefer to see it as smart, I didn't go fuck around in the shady bars right off the base but instead would go into town, actually try to get into Japanese culture and all of that. Had a couple places I'd hang out, like a sushi spot where when it was slow the chef and I would trade English and Japanese lessons. Eventually met a nice Japanese girl. Her goal was to be a big name in the Japanese TV news industry. Americans think Tom Brokaw level big. Neither of us was that serious in the relationship. I was in and out of Japan and my fighter wing of course considered San Diego its home base. So sometimes in Japan, sometimes floating my ass around on a carrier, sometimes San Diego, sometimes Hawaii, sometimes the Persian Gulf even, etc. For her, her career was over if she got serious. At that time, the way it worked in Japan was you got married. Congratulations, you're a housewife now. Obviously some married women work, but married women had an extremely low participation rate in the workforce, especially then, poor levels of career mobility, and on top of that marrying a gaijin wasn't going to do her any favors. Single and completely dedicated to the job was the way to be if you wanted to get anywhere as a woman. So when I was in Japan we did stuff. When I was in Hawaii she flew over and we spent a week surfing on the North Shore. When I was in Bahrain I told her this is a god-forsaken hellhole of a furnace and don't waste your money on airfare to come here. Overall zero expectation of marriage because eventually it was known I'd leave the military. I didn't want to settle in Japan long term, she had her life goals in Japan, etc. I get out of the military, get into computer programming in Silicon Valley, get a master's, all of that stuff. My Japanese friend is crushing it on her side of Pacific. Ended up going more toward executive than TV news personality, but still rising up through the ranks. We kept in touch, both dated other people. The catalyst to our marriage was she had eggs pulled out and frozen when she was younger because she knew with how the career ladder worked out there that kids were a major career killer and she'd be doing it later in life. Get message about how she's coming to SF for a trip and would I like to do a lunch? Sure. Turns out one of the topics was I'm about to pull the eggs out of the freezer, would you donate some sperm? Which in turn veered into if we're doing that, given our ages, how much we've both focused on our careers at the expense of other things, etc. Why not just get married so there aren't any custody issues, etc. I believe her when she said she didn't come to SF to try to backdoor a marriage, it was purely I don't want random sperm out of a bank, who in my history has pretty good genes. Oh yeah, that gaijin pilot. That being said, the discussion basically veered into like fuck we're old and both single, so. Been together over a decade now. I'm still in Silicon Valley doing my thing as the head of a large engineering org, she's in Japan pretty high up. We have a home in Hawaii so that there is like a formal family home for the kids and we all gather there. Kids shuttle back and forth. Best part is I look like a total sleazebag. I'm older than her, and she has that Asian stop aging thing going on so she looks significantly younger than me, and if she has one of the makeup teams work their magic, that takes a few more years off the top, and while I'm not making bad money by any stretch as a VP of engineering, she's an order of magnitude better paid than me. So I just look like the old guy gold digging the younger woman. But yeah, basically my relation is built entirely upon sitting there at the ferry building SF and in between shooing the pigeons away from our food, discussing how we're both old and still single. A few joking comments had been made long before about hey maybe when we're both in our 60s and still single we'll be advanced enough in career to marry. Marriage make visa significantly easier, she has a green card through me, and gets parole exemptions to keep it despite not residing in America. I have a visa that lets me get in and out of Japan easily but does not grant work authorization. Also things could get awkward around immigration if she showed up at San Francisco airport with 2 kids who had an American father and tried to enter on a tourist visa or a business visa via her company. Those visas imply non-immigration intent, whereas a lot of immigration officers are going to consider having kids with an American to be immigration intent and thus would deny her entry / consider the tourist visa to be fraud. Also makes moving money and such around easier because you're not say wiring the money into the account of some random foreign nation, it's all flowing through spousal joint accounts. Basically we could have worked out a bunch of stuff, trusts for the kids, yada yada, and at that point basically if you want to purely pragmatic about it, at that point you might as well spend another $35 to get married at the courthouse and get the travel perks. They'd done entire years in both countries. When they get to high school we'll keep them in the same school for all of that. Likely in the States since US high schools prep for American colleges and America does have the superior college options, And I mean, why sign up for the stress of the centralized Japanese college entry exam if you have options? When they're in the American system, they have tutors / after school classes to cover the Japanese coursework they don't get. American schools don't conduct lessons in Japanese, teach Japanese grammar, history, etc., and vice versa. The idea is they should have at least parity with both educational systems, and when it comes to high school they can pick either option and be prepared for it. My spouse. It's a proper marriage aside from the fact our careers are on different side of the Pacific. I have nothing against the concept of divorce as an option for couples, but to me personally it's always been if make that thou, the till death do us part bit is for real. No open marriage or any of that. That being said, there was definitely a pragmatic bit to it, of basically, okay, so we take your salary, my real estate, your real estate, buy a place in Hawaii on top of that, combine our investment accounts, the combined net worth of our marriage is now, oh wow. The whole emotional side to it has always been secondary. Our initial relationship was based on this is convenient and does not interfere with career goals, and the marriage has the same theme. The way I'd describe is that if one of us was dying and had 6 months to live, the other party absolutely would take a leave from work to be with the other, but there would also always be a certain element of, you know, the kids are still going to be alive after I die and you'll still need a purpose in life, so don't be away from work so long you fuck your career up in the air. If I had some terminal shit and the last week of my life was the week my spouse need to close some huge media deal between Sony and SoftBank, I have no issues dying alone so that she can get that done. Pre-COVID we saw each other in the flesh about 8 times a year. I've seen her once since COVID started due to travel restrictions. She came over once it became clear that America had spare vaccines to give away. I guess it depends how you define love. I care about her happiness, but say not seeing her during COVID hasn't really negatively impacted me. In a traditional sense, people would argue being in love would imply an inability to live without them. We obviously had plans about me bringing the kids over and doing a bunch of family stuff during the Olympics, since her company was, pre-COVID, going to be a major player in the broadcast, and that got cancelled. I'm more annoyed over that not happening in the sense it's denied an experience to the children than I am that I didn't get to see her. Showing the kids what a functional nuclear family where both spouses respect and care for each other is important to both of us, and I guess it's a debate how much of that is us loving each other in a non-traditional sense and how of that is us acting based on a shared value set. I haven't seen anything that shows a lack of adjustment or anything. They've just always lived in a world where dad takes you to SFO, gives you a kiss goodbye, you get on the plane, and mom is there when you get off at Haenda. It's also very easy because they're young and attachments outside the family aren't as strong. There isn't a significant other that they want to see and are upset we're going the summer elsewhere. As they grow, sport teams, school clubs, significant others, etc. are going to matter more to them, and we're likely to get some pushback, but my spouse and I always understood the kids are going to naturally start settling somewhere, and whichever they pick we accept. The only real difference is they have excelled at summer camp. I drop them off and they see the other kids clinging to their parents sobbing because they won't see them for 3 weeks, and our kids are like, the fuck is wrong with those weirdos? It's just 3 weeks, that's nothing. I think the big thing is they have stability. There is the family house in Hawaii. I have a house in the SF Bay Area, my wife has a multi-bedroom penthouse. The kids have a room of their own in each house, their own space, consistency, etc. Pre-COVID we had a lot of regular cross-travel. Their grades are good, they have some friends in each location, and the friendships seem solid considering they're elementary school kids, and all that stuff is pretty ephemeral in the long run. COVID has been a bit weird because they were both with me when it kicked off, and they've been stuck with just me and only very limited regional day trip type stuff since that happened. They were super worried about the family home in Hawaii being empty long term and unhappy the summer family gathering was brief.